Hi there. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I am delighted that you could come and learn with me about agrivoltaics. My name is Amber Mace, and I'm the CEO of the California Council on Science and Technology, and we have a great lineup for you today. I'd like to open our briefing by acknowledging that we are all calling in from different locations, many of us from what is now called the state of California, which is home to many indigenous communities who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. Before we turn it over to our experts to learn about agrivoltaics, I want to tell you a little bit about CCST, or the California Council on Science and Technology, and our Disaster Resilience Initiative. We are a nonpartisan nonprofit. We were created at the request of the legislature back in 1988. We're modeled after the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, and we were created to be a resource to California policymakers in the legislature, the executive branch, and the governor's office. And we are so lucky that California has such an incredible network of academic and research institutions. This is the backbone of expertise that we draw on. They're producing all this knowledge, policymakers need it. We work as translators to help connect the dots, to help pull this information in and make it useful, actionable, and timely. And we do this through a number of different mechanisms. One, like this briefing that you're joining us for today, as well as peer-reviewed reports. And we have a fantastic fellowship program where we place PhD scientists and engineers for a year of government service and leadership training. So if any of you are interested, our applications will open this in December, and we encourage people to come and bring your resources to Sacramento and help change policy on behalf of all of Californians. So as part of our mission to make California's policies stronger with science, we have launched a disaster resilience initiative, which is focused on helping the state be better prepared for, better respond to, and recover from these complex and intersecting disasters that are converging and cascading. So these are, many of them are climate driven, the heat, the too much water, not enough water, so the drought, the flood and the drought, the wildfires. We also have had the pandemic stacked on top of this, as well as cyber attacks. So there are many ways that we are bringing knowledge in to help policymakers be better prepared and build policies that build resilience for all Californians. So today we're going to be talking about building resilience into our energy system. And this topic is really important for California meeting its carbon neutrality goals by 2045, excuse me. And this goal is going to require ambitious developments and new innovations in energy and technology. So I am delighted that we're going to be learning about this. And I love this also because it's very cross-sectoral. It requires people with different expertises in different sectors coming together to solve an important problem. I am delighted to introduce our moderator, who is the Secretary for the California Department of Food and Agriculture. Secretary Karen Ross will be leading our discussion today on agrivoltaics. And I want to tell you a little bit about her really incredible background. So she became secretary in 2011 under Governor Jerry Brown, and then she was reappointed by Governor Newsom in 2019. And in reappointing Secretary Ross, Governor Newsom wanted to cite how her incredible leadership made all kinds of sense for her to continue in this role. And he focused on her unmatched leadership experience in agricultural issues nationally, internationally, and here in California, including environmental stewardship, climate change adaptation, and trade. Under her leadership, the department has grown its climate smart agriculture research, incentive and demonstration programs for a total state investment of over $950 million. Now, before joining CDFA, Secretary Ross was Chief of Staff for U.S. Agricultural Secretary Tom Vilsack, a position she accepted in 2009. And prior to that, she was the president of the California Association of Wine Grape Growers from 1996 to 2009, and vice president of the Agricultural Council of California from 1989 to 1996. So a really impressive, illustrious career full of incredible leadership. Secretary Ross, I am absolutely delighted to turn it over to you and so grateful for your willingness to moderate our panel.
Thank you, Amber, and I really appreciate the council addressing this topic today. It's very timely, as we all know. and I have such respect and admiration for your science fellowship program. I just wanted to put that plug in because it's a fabulous program. As everyone knows, because I understand we have quite the registration for this webinar today, agrivoltaics is a growing area of international interest as well as by the US government. We know that from early findings, it has the potential to produce energy on agricultural land while reducing the impacts on natural lands, reducing water use, and increasing crop yields. Sounds almost too good to be true. Such results may have an impact on land management decisions, food production, and energy sustainability. This opportunity for clean energy from our agricultural lands just proves that these early results need to be explored across many different agricultural regions and crop types to determine the viability of this new approach across the United States. I can't say enough, agriculture itself is very place-based, and agrivoltaics probably is also very place-based. In December of 2022, the Department of Energy awarded $8 million to 6 selected projects across the United States. Those projects are across the country to study different aspects of agrivoltaics to better understand how that practice can become more widespread. Unfortunately, none of those 6 projects were located in California. However, our state legislature is currently considering a bill, SB 688, to support agrivoltaics research in the state of California, as well as interagency coordination. Agrivoltaic systems are a new area of exploration in the state of California, and as Amber has already noted, absolutely crucial to us to meet our climate goals. Today, I'm excited to invite a panel of experts to explore the potential benefits and challenges of agrivoltaics on California's water, energy, food nexus. Now, each one of our speakers will have a couple of minutes to introduce themselves, but I'm so pleased to be able to learn today from Dr. Majdi Abou Najm, who is an associate professor with the University of California, Davis. Please go ahead, Majdi, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Secretary Ross, and hello, everyone. My name is Majdi Abou Najm, and I'm an associate professor of soil biophysics at UC Davis. I study the dominant processes controlling the flows of water, energy, food, and carbon across different scales. And I'm fascinated with the interconnectedness and the impact that they have on sustainability, the interconnectedness of all those resources. I seek integrative approaches at the nexus between water, energy, and food to develop sustainable solutions that promise circular economic progress, social inclusion, and environmental sustainability. Which brings me to agrivoltaics, which is the closest to having your cake and eating it at the same time in my mind. I see this as a perfect example of how a nexus approach can bring the very best in land efficiency and resource management to boost our food, water, and energy securities. Happy to be here.
Fantastic. We're happy to have you. Our next speaker is Dr. Jordan Macknick, who is with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Now, Jordan, I know that you were having some problems getting connected here. I hope that everything works now.
I think I can hear you, and I hope you can hear me.
We can hear you very clearly.
All right.
And there you are.
I think my video just worked too.
Great.
What a time for some technical difficulties. Yeah. But thank you for the introduction. I'm absolutely delighted to be on the panel here talking about this exciting topic, something highly relevant for the nation, but also I think especially for California. We've got a great other set of panelists with us. But from my background, my name is Jordan Macknick, and as mentioned, I am coming from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. I've been there for about the last 14 years, and about half that time, for the last 7 years, I've led the United States' largest, most comprehensive, and longest running agrivoltaics research project called the INSPIRE project. This is funded primarily through the U.S. Department of Energy, but we do partner with USDA, private companies, other entities all across the nation. We currently have 24 active field research sites looking at agrivoltaics that are located in all different parts of the country with different designs, different applications, different approaches. And so we really try to capture a wide diversity of different ways in which agrivoltaics could be implemented in ways that I think are most compatible with the farmers and in the regions and in the solar technologies that we're using. And so very delighted to be here and look forward to the conversation with you.
That's great, Jordan. Thank you for joining us. And our next speaker and our final panelist today is Ranjitha Shivaram, who is from Stanford, working on her doctorate and doing research. Thrilled to have you join us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Ross, and really excited to be on this panel this afternoon. So I'm Ranjitha Shivaram. I am an energy systems researcher and a PhD candidate at Stanford University. My work on agrivoltaics focuses on understanding the landowner perspective. So what is it that motivates different types of landowners to put solar on their properties? And so through a collaborative research project with my fantastic colleague, Nicole Buckley-Biggs, who I'm not sure might be on the call today, we tried to answer this question through a qualitative case study approach. So we focused on the San Joaquin Valley in California, as well as some of the peri-urban rangelands that are around our Bay Area. So that was one project. Here we focus on working land, so not just farming, but also ranching and forestry. And I also have proposed a multi-benefit value stacking framework, which builds together two kind of ideas: value stacking from the field of energy that people on that side might be more familiar with, and then multi-benefit conservation from food system science and natural resources management. The idea being that, we seem to be on this cusp. There's a new frontier where we're trying to explore what optimal mix of both energy and non-energy uses can we put on our land. And non-energy uses not just being limited to cropping or livestock grazing, but also nature conservation. Can we reduce soil erosion? Can we have native plants being restored? Can we have wildlife habitat? So kind of looking at that multi-land use mix. And I'm really thrilled to be here today. Thank you for the introduction.
Fantastic. I can tell this is going to be a rich discussion. So we're just going to jump right in. And this is a pretty foundational question, but I'd like to hear from each one of you, starting with Jordan, by asking you to define what agrivoltaics means to you. It's part of a complex system, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So Jordan, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll go to Majdi and then to Ranjitha. Thank you.
All right. I would say at the federal level and with the work we do at NREL, we take a very big umbrella approach with characterizing and defining agrivoltaics. And our definition really includes agriculture and solar being directly integrated. And so in some ways, the solar panels are affecting the ground cover and the agricultural activities underneath. And then also vice versa. And what we're seeing is that there are multiple applications in which we could see this. And so for us, we consider, crops, so horticulture, specialty crops, all sorts of, commodity crops being integrated with solar as one example. A second example would be grazing. And so traditionally we've seen sheep grazing with solar, but cattle configurations are emerging, as well as things like chickens or other sort of animals and other types of livestock management. And the third approach that we are seeing is what we might call, think about in terms of pollinator habitat or projects that are providing ecosystem services, sequestering carbon, providing pollination services all around. And then lastly, solar integrated greenhouses are sort of the fourth category of which we characterize agrivoltaics. All four of those can look very different, can have, within each of those categories, you can have a lot of different agricultural activities that you do with different types of solar technologies and arrangements and configurations. But those are sort of the four things that when we think about agrivoltaics, that's what we're including.
Excellent. Majdi, what do you say to that? How do you define all this?
What is agrivoltaics to me? Where do I begin? So I'll use multiple scales in defining agrivoltaics. So at a global, regional, or national scale, and as I worry about food, water, and energy security, I see agrivoltaics as a climate-smart method to maximize the potential out of our limited resources. I see it as a key player for maintaining food security for the 10 billion people who will be inhabiting this planet by 2050. I see it as a key player in dealing with heat extremes, with drought, with salinity, and the other challenges that significantly impact our food, water, and energy security. But also at the farm scale, I see agrivoltaics as the technology that can maximize our farmers' and growers' output from their lands. So agrivoltaics can create the synergy between agriculture, energy, environment, and climate to optimize the most important resources at the farm, particularly the sun, water, and soil. All this for boosting land efficiency. So if I want to answer what agrivoltaics to me, I'm going to give a very agriculture-centered definition, because this is how I think it should be. I think agrivoltaics will perform best when it can provide a positive service to an existing agricultural problem. Those problems can be heat extremes, causing, for example, heat stress to crops. It can be hail or frost damage, which is also a major concern to our growers here in California. It can be also drought, water shortage, or salinity related. So agrivoltaic systems optimize solar light between agriculture production and energy production in a manner that increases the overall productivity of land and improves soil health, as well as both water and light use efficiencies. That's how I see agrivoltaics.
Fantastic. And it is also interconnected. Ranjitha, what do you want to add to this conversation? And I want to encourage you all to go back and forth with each other as well, because I think that'd be a great way to really pull out some of the fabulous content you've already given us today.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you for both your answers. So yes, I do subscribe to the more inclusive and broader understanding or definition of agrivoltaics that Jordan laid out, but kind of pulling a little bit from what Majdi was saying. For me, we're looking at not just a particular individual field where you're stacking, say, grape crops with solar panels on top. Yes, that is agrivoltaics, but I'm also interested in what does a farmer do for the operation as a whole. So for instance, if we know that a tenth or a fifth of a farmer's land is potentially being fallowed or retired because water availability is declining, does the farmer choose to put solar on that piece of land and maybe combine it with pollinator habitat? And that, as an operation as a whole, will then begin to employ agrivoltaics as a technology to maximize whatever it is that particular landowner wants to maximize. So that's just one added perspective that I want to bring to the conversation.
That's an important one. And I just wanted to weigh in that, Jordan, you talked about all the multiple benefits, including pollinators and carbon sequestration. One of the things that I'm very interested in, and this isn't necessarily a question unless someone has good answers for me, but I worry about having bare dirt anywhere for lots of reasons, wind issues, but I also, is it okay to think about using minimal water for cover crops, which could be that pollinator and a habitat as well as carbon sequestration benefits? Doesn't necessarily help on the food production other than keeping our pollinators healthy. But I just there's so multiple ways to go to such a complex system. So I'm just wondering, I just want to jump into what are the barriers to developing? And I'm sure there's plenty of barriers. You've already outlined some really exciting opportunities, but there's always going to be challenges. And I'm just wondering what you're looking at with what you've described already. And Majdi, you get to start on this one, and then we'll go to Ranjitha. What are some of the barriers that we need to be thinking about, in addition to financing, decision-making, all those other kinds of issues?
Yeah, that's a great question, Secretary Ross. And we've done a survey with the growers, with extension specialists here in California. There are so many barriers that were identified, but the main two that our study showed was, first, growers want to see it. It's not enough that agrivoltaics was a success in France or in Italy or in Colorado or in Massachusetts. They want to see it here in California. They want to see it in Californian soil and with Californian crops. They want to see how much is the impact of agrivoltaics on yield, how much water savings it brings, and what are the different challenges in a Californian context. And the second challenge is what's the return on investment, cost-benefit analysis? How can it be beneficial? Because one thing about agrivoltaics, it's not like, yeah, let's test if compost is good in my soil. And if I don't like it next year, I won't adopt it. If you do agrivoltaics, you are wedded to this type of practice for the next 20 or 30 years. So we want our growers to be fully committed and fully aware of what are the different caveats of dealing with agrivoltaics. So those are the two main barriers to entry. Seeing it here in California, we need to establish a network of pilots, different soils, different crops, different geography, north, central, and south, and with different configurations. And this is what can scale agrivoltaics up.
Great, thank you. Ranjitha, did you have something to add to that? Give us your version from Stanford.
Yeah, so our interviews with a lot of farmers and solar developers tell us that, farmers have a few prominent barriers that come to mind when it comes to this. So energy price uncertainty, how much am I going to get for the solar that I produce if I do decide to sell it back to the grid? Fluctuations in that price over time and having no control over that process potentially. The second thing is commodity prices can vary too, right? A lot of our farmers have high amenity value crops like almonds, and the others might have grass like on rangelands. Each of these has different yields. So will the solar give them the same amount per acre, more or less? What is it that's going to drive that for them? Thirdly, we heard a lot about kind of land preservation ethic. I want this land to be passed on to my family. It's the next generation that's going to take it on. And I hope that they continue to farm this land, right? In California, especially the San Joaquin Valley is one of the most productive agricultural regions in the world. And a lot of people want to keep it that way. So, right. And so there's a tension between, should this go the solar route or should we just keep the land to be agricultural? And there's a lot of perceived difficulty and financial considerations. So that's from the farmer's perspective. From the solar developers, there's a lot of logistical constraints, right? So when almonds are being harvested, for example, there's a lot of dust. Dust settles on the panels, and that's the number one barrier to solar productivity. So this increased management cost and complexity by introducing agrivoltaics as opposed to just having solar panels, that's one consideration. On the rangelands, we heard a lot about damage from livestock. If you're having sheep under the panels, they can eat wires or gnaw at them. Yeah, and it's about $30,000-$40,000 a year. That was at the minimum. So that's not a small amount. So those are some additional barriers as well. And finally, I just want to quickly highlight some policies. So we know about the Williamson Act. There's some tax benefits to being able to keep the land as agriculture. That might be quite attractive. And then we also have the multi-benefit land repurposing program. So a lot of farmers get rental payments for habitat. So they're deciding between, should I put habitat or should I put solar? What matters to me? So there are these policy, you could call them barriers, you could also call them just, complementary things that farmers need to consider in this process.
Great. Very helpful, Jordan. Looking forward to your answer here.
Yeah, well, I think both Majdi and Ranjitha both covered a wide array of barriers that we'll see, and I think maybe I'll just sort of summarize them in one way, which is it needs to work for the farmer, and it needs to work for the solar company, and it needs to make financial sense. And I think everything that they sort of talked about all sort of builds up to that. And it's complicated because it's complex for a regular farm, for a farmer to make it work, and can be complex for a regular solar project for a developer to make it work. And now we're asking both teams to to work together, make some concessions, collaborate and come up with a design that works for both folks. And so it just gets complex, and a lot of those, sometimes the things that a farmer wants to see are going to, eat into the economics of the solar developer, and some of the things that the solar developer might eat into the compatibility or the farm equipment operations, and the yield for the farmer themselves. And so I think that is what we're facing. And I think Majdi also, I think, mentioned it well. Seeing is believing. It is possible. We have seen so many cases of people figuring it out, but we don't yet have, I think, that standard model that can be replicated across every single part of the country for every single type of crop. And so this is where, when we think about what's going to make sense for California farming, what's going to make sense for California crops, in California solar, that's where we're entering a new territory now.
Yeah, that scaling up is always the challenge, isn't it? So we're already starting to get questions. So I'm going to set mine aside, even though I have a million questions for you that go back to connectivity, electrifying the farm. This might give us more reliability. But one of our questions has come in from Grace. What considerations have been taken for connection to the existing electrical grid? Are we getting ahead of ourselves by going into that discussion, except that farmers are going to want to know that, as well as energy production, like, are we talking more localized, distributed energy? And then what about the storage with lithium batteries for mobility? Are you looking at all of those kinds of ways of making the system work better? Are we getting ahead of ourselves? I always think about the end before I start at the beginning. So I don't know who wants to go first. Ranjitha, would you like to take that one on first? You've been doing the case studies. Come on.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a really good question. So one of the things that we came across in our work is obviously transmission and distribution infrastructure being accessible is one of the most important things to doing solar installation. So yes, I think a lot of farmers were considering, will this even be connected to the grid? And one of the innovative ideas that came out of our research is when you ask farmers what share of your land you want to put solar on, typically it hovers between the 5 to 10% of my land amount. Okay. That could be various small chunks of land. So, one of the ideas that came out is, can we think of ways in which, if there's transmission distribution infrastructure close to a particular plot of land, are there different smaller chunks of neighboring parcels that we can pull together for the larger chunk of land, making it more viable to put solar on there? So having enough land that's connected to energy infrastructure is going to be critical. And the other thing is, in terms of localized use versus pulling it back to the grid, seems to me that one of the kinds of operations that's most amenable to installing utility scale solar, at least, was energy intensive farming operations. So a lot of farmers mentioned how drip irrigation was driving up their energy costs, and they could drive that down by having solar on their lands. A lot of others mentioned processing tomatoes and other such foods that require on-site processing that consumes a lot of energy. They can try and pull those energy costs down by having panels on-site. So those are some of the examples that we came across, apart from those who wanted to sell back to the grid.
Yeah, excellent. Jordan?
Yeah, I think a key feature here is going to be scale, both the scale of the agricultural operations and your loads, as well as the scale of your land and your solar project. Nearly every project we have seen for agrivoltaics has been grid tied, grid connected, and that's just because if you do have an imbalance in your electricity production and your loads, that can get very challenging. And the question, also got into batteries. If you want to have a microgrid system or an off-grid system, then you're looking at energy storage. That can be great for your energy reliability. That has a major impact on project economics and can make it, financially, not viable, basically, in many cases that we've seen, unless you're in a very extreme cases of not reliable grid connection or whatnot. And so it also, the larger you get, and is if you go beyond what your stable loads might be, for your agricultural operations throughout the day, then you are looking at directly tying in, tying into the grid. And depending on what scale you're at, you might qualify for, a net metering program, or you might have to, get a PPA, which can have very different impacts on the price you're getting for every electricity unit you're generating. For every electron you're producing, you might be getting a wholesale rate or a retail rate, which can be vastly different. And so this is where that scale question really comes into play. But like I said, nearly every project we've seen so far has been grid connected so far, and not in that microgrid or off-grid design.
Okay, I do have a vision in my head of microgrids, especially as we get more and more equipment on the farm going to electric, but that's another discussion. How about you, Majdi? What do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think Ranjitha and Jordan provided a comprehensive response. If I want to add something, I think it's going to be at a philosophical level that in
Mhm.
agrivoltaics there is no one size fit all solution. I think, and I say this to mean that growers, depending on their location, their soil, the crop they are interested in, the climate, and everything surrounding it, can develop the most perfect set of solutions that fits their own and only their own situation, and that doesn't have to apply for another grower with a completely different context. Some of the things to consider, and this is one of the things that I discuss with any grower when we're talking about agrivoltaics. Before even looking at the grid, I ask them, what are your energy use applications? Can you think of some value add? Can you think of an energy intensive application that you don't have now because energy is expensive, that you can add now that you can have access to energy? And to Jordan's point on scale is very important, and I try to give equal weight to what we call the megawatt scale, both big farms with multi-acreage, but I'm also very, very interested in talking to growers and farmers who have 1 to 10 acre sized plots, because I think that this is where an incredible amount of contribution and impact can take place. Many of the growers I talk to tell me my $1,000 to $2,000 a month energy bill is one of the main concerns I have. And if we can offset that from creating green energy through those solar panels, while also creating shade that saves water, and we'll go through the different benefits that come with agrivoltaics later on. I think those are the additional benefits that growers can think about.
Those are important points. Really brings in, you mentioned in your introduction about looking at the socioeconomic impacts. So this is a question that's come in from Jimmy with American Farmland Trust. And he says, start with Jordan, but this is not exclusively for Jordan, because your comments are a segue to what are the needs for workforce training to implement agrivoltaics, and how can agrivoltaics help build ongoing jobs compared with just the traditional solar development? And I think this is especially important for our farmers in the San Joaquin Valley who are thinking about their workers, both with less water, maybe more retired lands, as well as automation that's being driven for lots of efficiency and other reasons, that thinking about the workforce and the population in our small rural communities, how are they going to benefit? What are the workforce pipelines for that as you see them? And we'll start with Jordan because it was directed to you, but I do want to give all of our speakers a chance to respond to that from their perspective. Thanks.
Yeah, this is an absolutely terrific and really crucial question. So thanks, Jimmy, for asking that. And this is actually something we can learn from our colleagues in Europe and Asia as well, who in some cases have built agrivoltaic projects before us. But just because you build an agrivoltaics project and it's and you call it an agrivoltaics project, doesn't mean it will necessarily have that long-term success unless you have the workforce that's trained to do it and the right commitments from your agricultural partners as well as your solar developer partners. And so this is, I think, a great lesson learned, where we've seen some agrivoltaic projects that are built and then they're not really operated as agrivoltaic projects a couple of years later, precisely, I think, because of these workforce and some of these cooperative types of agreements. And so some of the things that I think are really essential is operating a traditional farm is different from operating on an agrivoltaics farm. There are differences in your equipment, differences in how you maybe in some of your planting, in your maintenance, in your harvesting activities, and some of that really you can't just read in a book. A lot of that you do need to learn. You do need to, maybe have an apprenticeship program. But I see a very strong need for some sort of agrivoltaics curriculum development, some sort of training program, and potentially a certificate that people could go through, and it would be best with on-field experience in order to best understand, how do I operate a farm, how do I operate this agrivoltaic system. And I think this is relevant not only for the agricultural operators but also for our solar operators. And we have certainly seen this in the United States as well. A project that might be built as an agrivoltaic project, but there wasn't sufficient training or sufficient overview of how to really adapt and how to really change up your methods to make them compatible in this new configuration. And so that is something I have personally been pushing for. I think there's a big need, a big gap right now for some sort of training, certificate, and apprenticeship program that could really make sure any new agrivoltaics project we build here are going to be long-term successes and provide those long-term jobs for the communities in which they're being built.
Great. That sounds like a great conversation for our community colleges, huh? Majdi, did you have anything you wanted to add to that? And you also, Ranjitha. Otherwise, I'm going to go to the next question.
Well, Jordan's response was very comprehensive. In as much as we need a climate-ready workforce trained, we also need an agrivoltaics ready workforce. There's a huge need for developing curriculum. So I'm interested in that, and we're already in discussions trying to fund an agrivoltaic module in our student farm here at UC Davis, so that our students would see the system at university before going and working in those systems. So there's an absolute need, and I hope that curriculum will be developed. Extension programs with the growers need to be also developed, like white papers and presentations.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah. And Karen, I'm glad you mentioned the community colleges, because we actually are right now partnering with the Kern County Community College District in developing a brand new agrivoltaics demonstration site and getting at these curriculum and these other elements. And so, this is sort of our first foray into this area. But I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think it's really good, and it can be a first model. And I think we're very open to collaboration, very open to partnering and seeing how can we take this initial investment and this initial approach and really replicate it, expand it, get it so it's beyond just Kern County and that region, but all throughout the state. I think it has a really great potential.
Yeah, that's terrific. Ranjitha, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, that was fantastic. Yeah. I mean, most climate jobs are jobs that already exist, right? So it's a matter of
we want to push the new frontier, right? So this is a question from Gabrielle, and she says, start with Majdi. What types of cropping systems common in California do you see as fitting with solar most easily besides sheep grazing? Are farmers thinking about the possible water-saving aspects of solar in terms of reduced need under panels and taking part of a field out of production, so concentrating water use? I would also want to throw in there, as the panel systems change and we're thinking about design, do we also need to be thinking about plant breeding for especially going below or between solar? There's a loaded question for all of you to contemplate.
Yeah, okay, great question. Let's see. I'll go back to the definition I provided for agrivoltaics, which is basically optimizing and harvesting solar light. If we start from there, I think this is where we can start thinking of what crop systems would fit the most. So I would start with crops that favor shade. And in California, a state blessed with a lot of sun during summer, not so much cloud cover, particularly in our part of the state. There would be for many crops more sun than what those crops need for photosynthesis. And the idea in optimizing solar light or harvesting the sun is, how about we share the sun as a resource rather than a boundary condition? What that means is thinking of the sun as a boundary condition would be taking it, putting it in our equations to calculate evapotranspiration and deciding on how much water we want to irrigate. Part of this sun can be more than what the crops need for photosynthesis. So if we design our agrivoltaic systems to take part of the solar light and provide the needed part of light for crops, then this is where we can provide the most optimum agrivoltaic system that is, because we're basically making use of every single photon, either for photosynthesis or for electron generation or electricity. This can reduce water, it can reduce heat, and extreme heat stress, and can provide a lot of water savings. We did a limited tomato experiment last summer, and we used different shades to mimic agrivoltaics. I was on minimal budget, so I didn't even have money to buy solar panels. I used shade. And we were able to save 10% water in our tomato experiment. That is producing the same amount of tomato with 10% less water. So the crops that come to mind, tomatoes, peppers. We have a pepper experiment ongoing now. Basil, our basils are doing great, and anyone is actually welcome to come and see our basil, tomato, and pepper experiment here at UC Davis. It's an ongoing experiment also this year. So those are the crops that come to mind, but I also think of berries, I think of grapes, I think of a wide range of crops that can benefit from some less heat and areas where water is a major concern, instead of making soil barren for some time. We can, with the water savings from part of our land, farm the rest of it without having to degrade it into a lower use type of agricultural production.
Great. Ranjitha, did you want to speak to this?
Yeah, no, that was really great. Summed up pretty much all I have to say, but quick addition to that is, we heard numbers ranging from about $200 to $2,000 an acre as a typical solar lease price that a developer would work with the farmer for their land when a third party is installing solar. So whatever crop it is, including the ones that Majdi mentioned, some of them are very high value. So for instance, grapes are about $8,000 annual revenue per acre, compared to like winter wheat or oats, which are more in the $100, $200 range. So you'd have to pay the economics of a lowered production, if there is going to be lowered production, of a specific high amenity value crop with what the solar can give you. That's a calculation that a lot of farmers are making as well.
Great. Jordan?
Yeah, I think in many ways, smaller scale farms, especially if they use hand harvesting or smaller equipment, are oftentimes the most compatible with agrivoltaics. Once we start getting into very large, large combines, or very things that are very wide or very tall or kick up a lot of dust, that can be oftentimes more of a challenge. So I think, but everything else that the panelists said was spot on. We've found, I think, just so far, a lot of things that are high value crops that you distribute locally, which oftentimes might be a local farmers market or a CSA program, oftentimes seem to be, fit in really nicely with the economics of an agrivoltaics project from both the solar developer and the farmer perspective. That being said, I want to see berries. I want to see grapes. I mean, we're already seeing, grape growers putting shade up there. I would love to have our shade producing electricity rather than just being a cost. And with that, I think our table grape growers oftentimes use lower, or smaller equipment than wine grapes. And so there might be a sweet spot or an opportunity there to really look at some novel approaches and technologies that could be compatible with the existing equipment that these growers are currently using.
Right. Good points. That's exciting. Our next question is from, I'm Mr. Rajan from the Santa Ana Regional Water Quality Control Board. Could waste heat from the cooling of the panels be cycled into the subsurface to lengthen the growing season in areas where winter cold limits seed germination? That's an interesting, complicated question. I mean,
I could not hear the question. Can you kindly
I'm
repeat?
sorry. Yeah, let me get closer here. Could waste heat from the cooling of the panels be cycled into the subsurface to lengthen the growing season in areas where winter cold limits seed germination?
Interesting. I can take a stab at this. So one of the things that we're studying in our group is what are the microclimate benefits that generate from agrivoltaics. And I have to admit it upfront. I learn all my new things from talking and learning from growers. I didn't know that frosting is an issue until I started talking to growers in Placer County. I didn't know that apples, for example, at some point in time need to be covered. Otherwise, the direct exposure to sunlight can give it those spots that reduces its value. So all those are different applications that the introduction of agrivoltaics can help with. Now, why am I saying this on this question is what we learned from frosting was interesting. The presence of solar panels creates a microclimate that is, and we showed that through data that we have from last year's experiment. It creates a microclimate that is favorable. It creates a gentle warming effect during the night, and another gentle cooling effect during the day. So when it is too hot, the shade reduces the effect of the sensible heat and the hotness around. And in the night, when there is a risk of a frost event, it gives it a gentle warming effect. Can this be scaled to the level of the question asked? I think I don't have an immediate answer to this, but that definitely is something that would be worth studying.
Something else to measure. And a pilot, right? That's why we need so many different pilots in different parts of the state with different crops. Jordan or Ranjitha, did you want to add to that? Yes, thank you. Jordan.
One thing that we've seen, which is, I think the microclimate effects I think are pretty consistent across geographies and regions, is that certainly that gentle warming at night and gentle cooling during the day. But we're also seeing some, sort of seasonal impacts as well. And so what this has also meant is that we are seeing it takes a longer time in the spring, for the soil to warm up for your germination. And so for the question that was just asked, actually we're seeing we might have a even further delayed, germination with agrivoltaics. That's what we're seeing in our experiments in Colorado, in particular. So, but the question was, can we, have some sort of novel approach to capture that waste heat in some ways and use that to heat the underground? I think, the understory, I think that's certainly possible. I think it's a new area to explore. But on the seasonal side, although it might delay our germination, what we're also seeing is that it also extends your growing season. And so you can have coming up against fall and winter, it does protect against frost, but also it also protects against excessive heat. And so for example, in Colorado in the past few years for our research sites, we've been able to be growing all sorts of lettuces and tender greens, well into August, when normally in Colorado, you just, those things are inedible, that in that hot part of the summer. So we've been able to really have the only, fresh outdoor grown lettuce on the market, and be the ones
Yeah.
only. So it's really, finding a nice niche where you're able to, when things are out of season for traditional agriculture in that area, agrivoltaics sort of opens up that door to provide, provide that produce when no one else is being able to grow it.
Which is an advantage, yeah. Ranjitha?
I think that was great. I don't have anything to add to this.
Okay. Well, guess what? This next question is directed at you to start with. This is from Greg, and his question is, I'm very interested in your research on landowner motivations regarding solar. Can you share what you found to be the game-changing information that can flip a landowner from a solar skeptic to a solar supporter?
Okay, that's a fantastic question. Thank you, Greg, for your question as well as the interest in my research. So let me take the second part first, game-changing information. So water, I think the fact that there's declining water availability,
Right.
most of the farmers we spoke to as well as the ranchers, looking at a 20, 30-year horizon, thinking, okay, now there's a Sustainable Groundwater Management Act called SIGMA that is going to limit my water availability in so and so portion of my land. So what am I going to do with that land now? And that consideration, especially for farmers who are trying to maximize their profitability, then they think, okay, if that land is going to be fallowed anyway, can I put something else on it? So, and then they begin to consider, does it have to be just solar? Can it be solar combined with grazing, solar combined with pollinator habitat? What can I do there? So that's the game-changing kind of, future-facing thinking that a lot of these farmers are already doing. A couple of other motivational factors are obviously profit maximization,
Right.
to reduce their volatility of their income and diversify their income. That is, again, it ties into water availability a lot, especially in the Central Valley. The third thing, kind of two broad buckets, which are related again, are kind of visual and ecological landscape value. Jordan hinted at ecosystem services earlier on, but also just the visual benefit of a landscape. There is some fundamental difference between farmers and ranchers here. A lot of the ranchers we spoke to were very concerned about how it would look if the rolling hills around the area were covered with solar panels. What would my neighbors think? This is not that they take a lot of pride in the way their land looks, feels. There's a lifestyle related value there. There's a ethic there. So that, definitely a major consideration for a lot of them. And also trying to preserve the land for future generations for agriculture. So, that said, there are three types of operations that we found would be most amenable to agrivoltaics and solar development in the near future. So farmlands that have declining water availability, that's the obvious one. Those that do not have permanent crops that have high amenity value. So we spoke to some farmers who were pulling out, this was surprising to me, these are nut trees that are highly viable, but they were older. So they're pulling out the older ones so they could use the water they could save for the younger nut trees, right? So these are like very hard calculations that these farmers are making. So that's the second one. The third are energy intensive operations. So those three types of farmers are, they seem to be most amenable to considering solar on their lands.
Okay, so now we know who we want to focus in on for our pilots. I have a feeling we're going to be running out of time, and I love this next question, and I'm sure you all have some good thoughts on this. So I'm just going to jump into it. This is from Stephanie, who's with the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab. And she wants to know, what are the federal and state policies needed to scale up agrivoltaics in California? As I noted there, do you have your wish list of 3 to 5 things you would love to see changed in either federal or state policy that could really be the signal for scaling up agrivoltaics in California? Jordan, do you want to go first?
Sure. And let me clarify. I am not allowed to give you specific policy directives, but I can comment on things that would be good to consider and to learn. And so, I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn here from other states that have implemented some sorts of policies. And so Massachusetts, I think, has, through their SMART program, has the first state level agrivoltaics incentive and policy. I really think there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. In terms of how to really find thread the needle perfectly, because on one end you want to avoid greenwashing and people saying they're doing agrivoltaics and they're not. You just sort of have business as usual. And on the other end, having policies that are so specific or so difficult for companies and farmers to achieve that you end up with sort of an under subscription, or no one can really adopt those or receive those incentives, and so no one does agrivoltaics because it is very challenging to meet those requirements. And I think Massachusetts, I think, did a really great job of putting their sticking their neck out there and trying something. And I think it's been successful in a lot of ways, but I think many people have commented on it's very hard to meet those sorts of requirements, and that's why we've seen sort of a delay in the building and implementation of projects in there. And so thinking about finding a way to make it useful but not overly
not too
specific.
prescriptive. Got it. Majdi, I want to make sure I give you and Ranjitha a chance to weigh in with your wish list.
Well, I would say SB 688 introduced by Senator Padilla is one great way to start pushing from a legislative perspective, trying to incorporate a clear definition of what an agrivoltaic system is, and what an agrivoltaic system that can, in Italy, they call it advanced agrivoltaic system, which are systems that can receive support, can mean. What are the implications on the Williamson Act, and how can we provide support while making sure that this does not conflict with the great mission of agriculture and food production. In terms of CDFA, I would love to see more support, for example, in specialty crop, specifically program specifically on agrivoltaic support and trials, but also in programs like the Healthy Soil Initiative, SWEEP maybe. I think even SWEEP can be easier than Healthy Soil, because in Healthy Soil,
because it will fund solar.
It funds solar, but the solar application is more related to how much water saving is there, and it follows certain guidelines and certain standard calculations that may be working on an agrivoltaic templates that can be friendly to programs like SWEEP and Healthy Soil can be a great way forward. Those are some of the quick thoughts that I have.
And Ranjitha, I hate to rush you, but I'm getting the hook. Did you have something you really wanted to add to this?
Yes, make it easy for farmers to access income streams.
I like that. Thank you. So we're coming to our close. Amber's back, which means I have to go off screen. I want to thank you. I want to spend time with each one of you in person. This is a great topic. There's obviously a lot of work to do, but I really look forward to doing it together with really smart people who are so passionate like you. Thank you. And Amber, thanks for asking me to learn today. I really enjoyed our panelists. I think they were superb.
Thank you so much, Secretary Ross, and to all three of our panelists. I learned so much too. This is why I love these briefings. So grateful that all of you could share your expertise with us today. I'm delighted also that this is recorded. So if anybody would like to share this with any of their colleagues, we will post this on our website. Also, we have the one-pager that summarizes some of the key information about this and contact info for the experts that you've heard from today. So please check that out. We'll also send you information as a follow-up. Please do fill out our survey, because we want to continue to give you information that's useful for you as well. We also welcome you to sign up for our next briefing, which is coming up on September 21st, and that is on the human health benefits of improving forest health in California. So this is in our wildfire series. I'm really excited that this report will be coming out soon. So thanks to our CCST team, especially Ryan and all the folks who are working behind the scenes, and thanks to all of you. Have a good day.